wanted to do this character study next because of what happened with my quarantine recording of the actual fight with Maha and the big reveal. I'm still pissed about that, but I think this video will serve as a nice companion piece to hopefully make what happened to my playthrough slightly less disappointing, at least for me. Mia is one of the many playable characters in .hack imoq, but if you've been following along with my playthrough, you know she's much more than that. Please be advised right up front, this video will contain spoilers. As one of the central characters from the pretty large cast, there are some big developments within imoq centered around Mia. In a pivotal scene in Quarantine, the final chapter of imoq, we come to learn that Mia is actually the 6th phase Maha within the world. And sprinkled throughout the earlier volumes of imoq, we get some crucial hints that lead us up to this bombshell of a revelation. In fact, as we continue to poke and prod at the fabric of the system by defeating phase after phase, we start to see Mia exhibiting some pretty baffling behavior. Her speech input goes on the fritz, her memory becomes impaired, and she kinda just wanders around like a drunk. The writers of .hack imoq do a lovely job connecting Kite's efforts to the weird shit that is happening to Mia. But before we continue down this rabbit hole, let's talk about who Mia is as she's sort of presented to us in Infection. Mia is an illegally edited character within the world. No one, and I mean no one, has the option of modeling their character after an anthropomorphized cat in this version of the world. It's just not a thing. Yet somehow, here's one right before our eyes. Her class is a Blade Master. That's probably the most normal thing about her. She's also incredibly wily and mischievous, something we observe in her interactions with Pyros, though I suppose her ability to fool him isn't really all that impressive. I guess what I'm getting at with all of this detail you could totally pick up on yourself is that, for all intents and purposes, Mia just seems like another tech-savvy hacker who wanted to express her individuality with her character model in ways that the game's character customization parameters wouldn't allow. Though uncommon, we've seen this with the likes of Helba as well as Pyros. But the choice of a cat, as well as Mia's specific execution of it, should raise some flags concerning Mia's actual identity. So too should Mia's love for aromatic grass, a worthless item that sells for very little and also doesn't have much trade value. And speaking of trading, credit for this one goes to Dawnseeker176. Looking at some of Mia's trade items is pretty telling, especially the Lover's Spell Scroll, which actually is an extremely subtle hint at Mia being Maha. Maha's epithet is the Temptress, and she uses seduction-themed skills like Spirit of Love and Suspicious Seduction. In a nice parallel to .hack Sign, Mia forms a close kinship with Elk, a player whose character model closely resembles Tsukasa. And the last curious thing that should raise some flags is Mia's inexplicable ability to see Kite's bracelet. Normal players should not be able to see it, yet that's the first thing she brings up when she notices Kite in Infection. Again, I just have to praise the writing in imoq. All those tiny details taken one by one don't really do a whole lot, but if we take them all together, it becomes clear as day that Mia is no normal player. Now, without further ado, let's get back to the rabbit hole, and from here on out, for the purposes of clarity, I'll be referring to Mia as Maha. If we want to successfully traverse this rabbit hole, I think we've got to start with .hack 0, which is a light novel that, as far as I can confirm, was slated to have 3 volumes. Unfortunately, only 1 volume was published, but you can find a fan translation of it online. Primarily, .hack 0 is important for a deeper understanding of what happens to Sora after the events of .hack Sign, and what his specific connection is to Skaith, the Terror of Death. We can also notice in imoq a few posts on the BBS alluding to characters like Alf from .hack 0, and we get a deeper appreciation for Zeeg that really pairs nicely with the events of .hack Liminality to add some cool backstory and give us deeper insight into the fate of the Lost Ones. But I'm not going to be talking about any of that here. Instead, I'm going to be focusing on a little scene toward the end of the first volume between Orca and Balmung. The scene begins with Orca telling Balmung about a strange character he encountered in Makanu. From his description, it should become crystal clear that he's talking about Maha as Mia. In fact, chronologically, this seems to be the first reported sighting of and interaction with Maha in this form. Quote, "A cat person was sitting on the banks of the canal. The world was filled with all kinds of people. There was always a possibility that such a thing would be included in a future version update, but for now, there were no fairy or beastman race options for players to choose from in character creation. With the exception of grunties and fountain spirits, the only non-human creatures in the game were the enemy monsters. A cheat character? Probably. It could have been an NPC though. I tried talking to her, but she wouldn't respond. If it were an NPC, it should be the other way around. An NPC that doesn't talk would be pointless. Toolsmiths, record keepers, and the other shopkeepers. Each of the NPCs in charge of the in-game shops will ask for the player's business and provide explanations for anything when necessary. The only limitation was in the number of dialogue options they had for certain tasks. That was just how they were designed. And also, what was it? That grass that's used as cat toys, the fluffy kind? Aromatic grass? Yeah, that. She had some. End quote. We can observe a few interesting details from Orca's encounter. First and foremost, as stated previously, no character should be able to look like this. Maha's appearance here is reminiscent of her form in .hack sign, but more in line with the designs that players would have access to in the character customization interface. Now for those who don't know, Maha formed a close bond with Tsukasa and .hack sign, one solidified with Tsukasa's gift of aromatic grass. At the end of the series, Maha sacrificed herself to save both Tsukasa and Lady Subaru from potentially being data drained by vagrants sent by Morgana. This is actually a nice parallel to how she saves Elk in quarantine after her transformation. Though she has been working with Kite and the rest of the team, her bond is with Elk, and she reveals how strong it is by forcing him and only him to be warped out of the danger zone even after she's transformed, even after she's admitted to and exhibited some pretty extensive memory loss. Though Maha doesn't remember any of the events from .hack sign, the significance of the aromatic grass has been imprinted on her subconscious. Apparently, so has Tsukasa's significance, as this also explains her behavior toward Elk in imoq. But what I find especially interesting here is the theory proposed by Orca. Instead of assuming like Kite and Elk do that this iteration of Maha is another player character, he tentatively lands on NPC. Balmung quickly refutes this idea, but they don't just land on player character as the alternative. Her behavior in this encounter is too aberrant, as we can see from the following passage. Quote, "She never made eye contact with Orca, and when he spoke to her, she wouldn't respond. Not only that, but he hadn't been able to use any items on her. In other words, as far as the system was concerned, she was being treated as no more than an in-game structure, like a building or bridge." End quote. What is probably the most intriguing part is that Orca attempts to use items on Maha. Balmung casts doubt on the NPC interpretation, which would seem to leave only player character. After all, Orca encounters her in a root town. There wouldn't be any enemy characters. That being the case, if she's not an NPC, and she's clearly not a grunty, then she's gotta be a player character. Only, that would mean Orca could use items like healing potions or mage's souls on her, but that's clearly not the case. He might have even tried a stat increasing item, all to no avail. And I love this subtle detail about being, quote, treated as no more than an in-game structure. After all, she is Maha, one of the phases that is part of the very fabric of the world. This line both gets at the general intrigue and hints at Maha's relational positioning within the world. She's not just some person who logs into and plays the world, which the wording of this line hints at nicely. After some unsuccessful poking and prodding, Orca decides to observe Maha for about an hour. As he relays to Balmung, nothing happens, and Maha eventually leaves with a speed that exceeds that of a goblin with Abdu cast on it. We learn that both Balmung and Orca find this whole thing disturbing, and then we get the following insight. Quote, "What does it mean? What would be the point of an NPC that doesn't speak or try to interact with the players at all? Well, it's not like there aren't plenty of more lively NPCs already." "Don't be foolish, Orca," Balmung snapped at him. "You said so yourself, didn't you? That they were an unusual character? There was no such thing as random chance in the world. Everything that happened or appeared here was created for a pre-planned purpose. If that cat-like NPC Orca saw wouldn't take any action at all, then there must have been another agenda behind it. There must have been a reason for it to take no action, a goal that could only be achieved by watching and waiting." End quote. This is where the two start to consider the significance of the encounter. If there is one truth about the world, it is that there is no such thing as a random chance. Everything that happened or appeared here was created for a pre-planned purpose, and Maha is no different. She is remade as a pseudo-player character to ensure that the will of Morgana triumphs over that of Aura. What is she watching and waiting for, and why does she leave at that moment? Putting the pieces together as best as we can, we have this piece from Orca that Maha doesn't seem to respond or to interact with other players. Our next sighting of her is again in Makanu, and she's together with Elk, conversing like any normal player would. And then right after that, she spots Kite and runs up to him to talk immediately about the Twilight Bracelet that no normal player should be able to see. Now here's where I tie in some of the language from the last passage I quoted from .hack 0 with a little bit of my own theories. I think Morgana chose this fate for Maha, posing as just another player character, in order to keep a lookout for the bearer of the Twilight Bracelet. Morgana must know that this is something Aura can bestow upon a player as a means to thwart her plans. That's why she has Skaith relentlessly pursuing Aura. We also know that appearing like a player character is something the phases can do. The Skaith-Sora connection is revealed in .hack 0, and Carl thinks that Sora, though incredibly weird, is just another player. And there are parts of Sora from the player's consciousness that fight against his imprisonment at moments within the narrative. And though, unlike Sora, Maha was always of the world, and by her own admission only exists within it, like there's not a human in front of a computer screen, parts of her fight against the will of Morgana as well. In the scene before her transformation into the phase, Mia yells, "I want to stay as me." She remembers her love for Tsukasa and superimposes that upon Elk since his character model looks so much like its .hack sign counterpart. Though Elk may not be what she was ultimately watching and waiting for, something is stirred up deep inside her, something she can't fully explain, but she knows on an unconscious level that it has something to do with this Wavemaster and aromatic grass. This would explain the dramatic shift from not talking or interacting to behaving more like a normal player. And then Kite comes along and she runs right up to him. If Balmung's theory is correct, I believe this is what she was watching and waiting for. She seems to know an unnatural amount about the Twilight Bracelet and its capabilities and desires to see more. And this is where Maha the Temptress must come into play. Morgana plants Maha to attempt to thwart his efforts by first lulling him into a false sense of security. Maha as Mia is on Kite's side. They form parties together and she initially aids him in his quest. But as Kite and the gang make it through phase after phase, Maha's time eventually comes to reveal herself. In one final act of rebellion against Morgana's will, Maha transports Elk out of harm's way. She must play her part and try to stop Kite, but she at least does Elk one last kindness. After the battle, Maha reverts back to her Mia form and we see Elk desperately casting various restoration spells to try to revive her. Her last words before vanishing are, "Oh, Elk, thank you." It's incredibly heart-wrenching. But what precisely does she thank him for? It's Kite's bracelet and his illegal skill that once again saved the day, but she expresses her gratitude to Elk. Again, for now all we have is interpretation. At the time of this video's release, my playthrough of imoq is not yet complete, so I don't want to delve any further. Perhaps the similarities between Elk and Tsukasa go deeper than skin level. There's something in who they are that resonates with Maha, and I think it's this. They both treat Maha like an actual friend. Pun intended, Maha can give Tsukasa the world. Pretty much nothing is off limits so long as Tsukasa abandons any desire to return to the real world. The dynamic between the pair is one-sided, and Morgana sets it up that way for a reason. But things get thrown out of balance with the unexpected act of kindness from Tsukasa with the gift of aromatic grass. Up until this point, Maha has been a mere pawn, a cog in service of Morgana's will. Tsukasa shocks her awake. He has nothing to gain from this gift. It's the most useless item within the game, but it's also the most valuable. You can't assign money or trade value to it, so its value can only derive from the giver's feelings for the recipient. Here's a quick real-life example. If you give someone a Ferrari, the monetary extravagance of the gift eclipses the giver's intentions. Yes, there are probably still feelings conveyed and reciprocated, but the sheer dollar value and desirability of the object corrupts the purity of the exchange to some extent. Not so with something that has no value. I can't benefit reputation-wise or indebtedness-wise as the guy who got person X an extravagant gift if the gift is useless and virtually valueless. Tsukasa gives a gift that represents all of his heart and nothing more or less than that. And for the very first time, the Temptress is seduced. And then there's Elk. Maha in Mia form stands out as a potential hacker or, at best, a mischief maker by virtue of her character design. Be that as it may, Elk treats Maha like any other player, and more importantly, like a friend. Time and again he finds the courage to attempt to convey his genuine feelings of care for Maha. While these confuse her, they stir up something within her that again is radically antithetical to the dynamics Morgana has set up. It's not all about her utility to Morgana's grand designs, and again, aromatic grass plays a pivotal role. Generally, players form parties in order to take on difficult dungeons to acquire better loot and EXP. All Elk wants to do is go look for aromatic grass with Maha. He stands to gain nothing, perhaps not even level gains. Again, the uselessness of this item speaks volumes. We see that all Elk wants to do is spend time with Maha. Finally, I think we're getting somewhere. Maha thanks Elk, I think, for the way he feels about her and how he shows it. Though she's not conscious of it, I wonder if she knows on some level that her existence in this form is fraudulent. Despite that, Elk sees something real and even beautiful in her, and this is all without the use of her unparalleled powers of seduction.